Well, auditors generally have a bit of a bad rep. In South Africa, I'm afraid it's made even worse after some of them were slapped by the state capture inquiry, being slammed heavily. More recently, an auditor was hit with an almost 5 million rand fine for breaking rules at Eskom. But we're busy marking Internal Audit Awareness Month and a look at the role of the professionals and how they conduct themselves and what the industry is looking like. James Gourrah, former chair of the Institute of Internal Auditors, joining us now. Hello to you, James. Appreciate your time this morning. So just give me a sense then, if I imagine it's Audit Awareness Month, there's some introspection taking place at the moment. What would we be introspecting exactly? What's your concerns? Good morning.
Good morning, Gareth. Yes, no, thank you. It goes without saying, as you've just indicated, that with looking at just the headlines on a regular basis, now it doesn't matter where in the world you are, but particularly here at home in South Africa, we're inundated with the governance challenges that we have. And of course, that has eroded the trust in very important institutions like the auditing profession, both internal audit and external audit. Now, it's not only because of that context that we acknowledge the month of May all over the world as Internal Audit Awareness Month. This month, it really is to identify or to recognize the important role that internal audit has to play. And when we talk about auditors, it's important to differentiate between the role of an external auditor who provides an opinion to all the stakeholders on the financial affairs. Do the financial statements fairly represent the financial position of an organization, versus the role of internal auditors who have a much bigger remit, and acknowledging that those two role players with your governing body and your management are important pillars of strong governance. And during the month of May, we'd like to actually recognize and lift and to the wider public to acknowledge that whilst we have a lot to rebuild trust, specifically internal audit has an important role to play to restore the trust, but also to ensure that the public at large understand that internal audit does serve a public interest and not only the shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely, because we've seen what can happen when internal auditing goes horribly wrong as well, and there's accusations of bribery and let's call it creative accounting and creative number auditing as well. So when we talk about who is auditing internal auditors, of course, there would be the Institute as well. So let's talk about this fine, for example. This auditor recently slapped with a 4.95 million rand fine as well. So how do you view something like that, James? Is that a way that the board is handling this? They're identifying the issues, they're dealing with the situation, and they're fining these people? Because some would say, you see, it's still corrupt, there's still bad apples, but you also, well, the board is also dealing with it. So I suppose you've got to be careful how you frame this, don't you?
Oh, most definitely. Just to correct that, so that fine was really slapped from a perspective of external audit, but the same would apply in taking action, taking strict disciplinary action against any internal auditor who is a member of the Institute. So we are the oversight body. So we're not only the voice, we actually need to make sure that we restore that trust. We need to serve that public interest, and therefore, if any internal auditor who is a member of the Institute steps out of line, we've got a code of ethics, and that code of ethics is a very simple one. It's based on 4 critical pillars of integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. And if any of those pillars is compromised, then the Institute does act as far as possible and as stringent as possible on those member. And that would include removing that member as a member of the profession.
I imagine this is a lot like the code of ethics for chartered accountants, for CAs as well. It's a code of ethics, but it can often be seen as more of a guideline, really. I know that CAs, they try with their various organizations, try to ring fence a lot more regulations and rules, but in the end, it comes down to dealing with humans and their ethical principles, their morals, their trustworthiness as well. So how do you try and take it from a code of conduct to something legally enforceable? How easy is that, or is that an ongoing fight?
That is certainly an ongoing fight. So the external audit is a regulated profession in South Africa, whereas internal audit profession is self-regulating. So we will enforce that code of ethics irrespective of whether we are really relying on people abiding to it. But the steps that we take other than enforcing discipline is that we enforce that every member must have a minimum number of hours of professional training on an annual basis. That must be verified. Included in there is that every single internal auditor must receive ethics training on an annual basis, because that is such an important element. Having a strong culture drives good behavior. At board level, in the profession, etc. And so we want to enforce that the code of ethics is something that is not just a checklist that somebody signs once a year, but we actually understand and we abide by it, and we will observe it in every aspect of our lives.
How difficult, how damaging was it? How difficult was it to watch the slamming that internal auditors, James, were getting, and how difficult was it to watch what was happening during the State Capture Commission? Because a lot of dirty laundry was coming out, and the industry and the sector itself taking quite a hit. Was it a good thing that all this dirty laundry, as I said, came out of the wash, or do you think it was a little unfair and the sector took too much of a hit that was undeserved?
I think it's a combination of both. So the one thing that we are familiar, when things go wrong, there will always be the question being asked, where were the auditors? And of course, we take our responsibility, we take it seriously. And when the questions are asked, we need to take introspection. We need to understand, what have we done everything that we should in order to assist the organization. And when organization fails, we need to take introspection in terms of, were we part of that failure as well. So yes, it's good that it comes out, because it allows us to see what we need to do better. But of course, it's also a little bit worrying when these happen as well. And in the South African context at the moment, it's just very challenging generally. And of course, that we need to continually look at how do we improve. So we've got all the quality management measurements in place both from an institute perspective and the standards that we expect every internal auditor to follow on a daily basis. But of course, things go wrong. And the only thing that we can do is that when things go wrong, that we actually learn from it and we take action.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm glad you mentioned the word measurement. I'll leave this as a last question to you. James, we get to the end of this month, what is Internal Auditors Awareness Month. What's the one thing that you would like to see changed in the industry? I know I'm throwing a very wide-ranging question, but it's a whole month we're dedicating to this as a sector. What's the one thing you want to see changed? Last question to you.
Very much so. Thank you so much. The important one is that if our stakeholders understand the role that internal audit has to play, and this acceptance in terms of the role that internal audit is to play, yes, we need to work, and they're continually challenging. We live in a very volatile environment, and if we acknowledge that internal audit has such an important role to play to help our governing bodies navigate all the volatility, all the uncertainty, all the complexities that exist in the world, and they're well placed in providing that objectivity to the boards, and to bring the expertise in managing the risks so that organizations can succeed. That would probably be one of the best outcomes of the current environment in which we operate.
Well, hopefully you and I can touch base again, and we'll have you back here on ENCA end of the month and see if that has come true. James, what a pleasure. Appreciate your time this morning. James Gourrah, former board chair of the Institute of Internal Auditors of South Africa, talking about Internal Auditors Awareness Month.